One moment, he was surfing. The next, he was screaming in shock as the jagged teeth of a great white shark sliced through the skin of his thigh, pinning him by the bone to his board. People helplessly watched as the ultimate predator violently attacked someone who they knew and loved. That morning, Lance hadn't seen warnings, but all along the coast near the Granites, a popular surfing spot, shark sightings had left fishermen and surfers alike uneasy. In nearby Streaky Bay, this video was shared by a fisherman urging surfers to keep a lookout because the massive shark was close to shore, looking for something to eat. Another fisherman got confirmation that the shark wasn't just looking for something to eat, it was desperate. As the sun began to crest over the Great Australian Bight, a man pulling crab pots up onto his boat made a startling discovery, hauled up from the depths of the sea. His trap was not at all where he'd left it. It had been viciously dragged across the ocean floor against currents and waves for over 500 meters. That's the length of 5 football fields. The man instantly knew that there were very few creatures strong enough to drag his whole line and steel trap that length. When he pulled up the pot, dripping in seaweed and the muck of the sea, he got his confirmation. The trap had been completely crushed, chomped to bits in the jaws of a shark. Great white sharks have one of the strongest bites in the world, coming in at 4,000 pounds per square inch. Their massive jaws, lined with 50 razor-sharp teeth, are capable of slicing through muscle, tissue, and bone with ease. Great whites in particular like to hug along the coastline, hunting for marine mammals like seals that can provide them with the energy that they need to maintain their place as a top predator. And of course, this is thanks to the seal's high fat content. And on that morning, 2 days into 2025, at least one great white was doing just that off the waters of the Granites. By 2025, Lance was living in southeastern Queensland, enjoying the natural splendor of the area, including its most famous beach, aptly named Surfer's Paradise. Lance loved the life that he made for himself on the East Coast, but nevertheless was thrilled to fly back home and visit his family and childhood friends over Christmas and into the new year of 2025. After weeks filled with family parties, it was on January 2nd that he finally had a chance to surf on the very beach where Lance had learned to surf more than 2 decades ago. He was at the Granites just as the sun was beginning to rise. He hadn't seen any of the warnings. He hadn't seen a post made by his friend Jeff Schumacher that read, "Heads up to all surfers at Granites today. There's a large, aggressive great white very close to Granites/indicators." Sharks like great whites are crepuscular, meaning they're on the hunt around sunrise and sunset. Visibility is lowest for their prey during these times, giving them better opportunities to sneak up on their unsuspecting prey and grip them in their jaws. Lance knew that sharks were more active during these times, but he had no way of knowing that this day on the waves would be any different than the thousands that he had had before. He surfed throughout the morning and the afternoon, stopping only to grab a bite to eat at a nearby favorite spot of his and to talk to many of his longtime surfing friends who'd been out enjoying the swell with him. One thing that comforts his family to this day is that everyone that they've talked to has said that Lance was having an incredible day. He was beaming, laughing, riding wave after wave. Sometime around 6 p.m., other surfers watched from shore and the water as he rode the best wave of the day. Lance immediately began to paddle back out to soak up the rest of the daylight. But tragically, the beams of sun he felt on his face as he dug through the water, paddling back out to sea, would be the last he ever felt. On the shore, surfers watched in horror. There was nothing but the sound of the ocean waves on the sand, the chatter of surfers in the water, and then a horrific splash and scream. A 13-foot-long great white shark exploded out of the water, attacking Lance from below. With a single bite, the shark grabbed hold of his right thigh, slicing through his flesh and pinning him to the board. In an instant, he was dragged beneath the waves. Nearby jet skiers began to rush toward the place where he'd gone under, but in the few seconds that it took them to get there, there was nothing but a trace of blood blooming in the water. One jet ski raced to shore to get to help, while 2 others began to zip back and forth across the water, desperate to find any sign of Lance. They hoped that he was bobbing in the water nearby and that he was just injured but waiting for rescue. And of course, they had every reason to think this because statistically speaking, most shark bites, including those that result in fatalities, are typically a result of exploratory bites. And this is due to sharks believing that a surfboard in this case, or even a person swimming at the surface, is a marine mammal. But usually, once they take that bite, they realize that our bony structure means that we aren't a beneficial meal for them, and thus they don't bother, let us go, and usually move on. It is important to note that these statistics, however, should be taken with a grain of salt, as of course there aren't that many people in the ocean, and thus the low number of shark attacks could be simply a result of sharks not being able to walk on land. The jet skiers searching for Lance's body knew the ocean, and they knew that if they were gonna save him, they had to find him quickly. But as days turned to nights, they were at a loss. All they had to show for their efforts was his surfboard, which sported a bite from a great white, as well as a broken leg strap. For 2 weeks, Australian officials searched the waters for his body to no avail, and Lance, who was made who he was by the sea, had tragically met his end there as well. Lance Appleby's death was not the first off Granite's Beach, and the one that occurred not long before his was eerily similar. 55-year-old Todd Gendle was not only an avid surfer, but a wildly talented one. On October 31st, 2023, he was enjoying the thrill of his favorite place to be, gliding atop a wave and taking in the beautiful Australian coastline. Todd wasn't a native of Streaky Bay, but he had grown fond of it. The beach and waves were peppered with people, which often makes surfers feel more safe. Todd is believed to have had about 20 other surfers near him at the time of the attack. As he was waiting for his set, there was a powerful shove beneath his board. Witnesses gasped as he was mercilessly thrown into the air, only to splash back down into the water seconds later. He took a deep breath of air as he surfaced, unaware of what had just happened. Then, a great white shark latched its jaws around his legs. With enough force to crush bone, he was bitten and dragged beneath the waves. For an instant, he was able to thrash and bob his way back to the surface to take another desperate drag of air. But then, once more, he was pulled beneath the water with a ruthless yank. People walking along Granite's famous rocks and tidal pools began to scream. Surfers hurried to shore, screaming and hollering for help. In the midst of the chaos once again was Jeff Schumacher. He leapt on a jet ski and zipped to where Todd was last seen. But it was no use. His board bobbed up and down, abandoned. A large bite mark marred the bottom.
I grabbed the surfboard and proceeded to go up and down the lineup behind me there and looking in and out, but I couldn't find anything. There was no sign of anything.
As Jeff raced through the lineup, desperate for any clues, he was urged to go back to shore. On the back of the jet ski was a teenager, and that teenager was rightfully terrified. Jeff dropped them off safe and sound on land before he returned back again. However, this time he had a plan.
I knew the shark would come to me if I turned the ski off and just, within a minute, it was a big female turned up at the side of the ski.
The female was massive, with Jeff's estimate putting her around 13 feet long, about the same length as the shark that would attack Lance months later. The shark circled him a few times, investigating before taking off, disappearing beneath the depths. Soon, large waves from a nearby storm began to steamroll the beach. Jeff had no choice but to head back to shore. Tragically, despite search and rescue's best efforts, Todd's body was never found. Just like Lance, he had vanished in the jaws of a great white. In 2023 alone, there were 3 fatal shark attacks off the South Australian coast. If this episode piqued your interest, then our previous episode about the only fatal leopard seal attack in human history is likely to do the same. You can find it at the end screen of this video.